All right, everybody. Thank you again. We're back for night 2 of the City of LeGrande's public hearings on the General Enterprise and Other Funds, the Budget Committee meeting. We're going to start with a call to order and our roll call. So we can have Sandra take that away with a roll call for tonight, please.
Okay. Steve Clemens.
Yes, here.
Gary Leonard.
Here.
Lillard, excuse me, I didn't say it correctly. David Glabe.
Here.
John is excused. Nicole Howard,
Here.
Marianne Meisner,
Here.
Justin Rock,
Here.
Greg Amer,
Here.
Amer, Matt Barber,
Here.
Edward is excused. Scott McConnell,
Here.
Ashley O'Toole, Ashley,
I am here.
you're here. Corrine Dudo,
Here.
and Max is also excused. I will get better at this, I promise.
All right, thank you. If that's the roll call, suppose the next item on the agenda then would be approval of the agenda. So I'll entertain a quick motion real quick to get tonight's agenda approved, and we'll get going on it.
Actually, Ashley, you don't need a motion on that. There are no changes to it, and it was provided to you in advance. We should be good.
Okay, agenda's approved. So the public hearings on the proposed 2021 to 2022 budgets and state revenue sharing are still open, and they shall remain open until the close of the hearings. I suppose from here, then we can kind of get into a quick recap from last night. And one thing I wanted to mention, Robert, before we hand it over, just for folks that are joining us because it's the beginning of the meeting, something that may be worth mentioning about last night and tonight that you're going to notice is a lot of the members of the committee didn't ask many questions throughout the process last night as we were going section by section. The primary reason for that was in the weeks leading up to these hearings, members of the budget committee had reviewed the budget. Any questions that they had were emailed to the heads of those particular departments. A lot of questions were flushed out. And so as anybody viewing from home, I didn't want anybody to have the feeling that we're just kind of sitting on our hands and running through this. We had done a lot of preliminary work leading up to this. So if it goes a little more streamlined again tonight, it's really because of that as well. So I just wanted to mention that at the beginning of the night this time. And I think, Robert, that's it. I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. So last night, the first portion of the hearing was the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee met and voted to approve that budget, and it will be heard by the City of Grande Urban Renewal Agency for adoption at their June meeting. And then we transitioned into the city's general fund, and we conducted the budget presentation, walked through the major changes in each of the budgets by department, answered any questions that the committee had of the department directors, and then moved into the discussion of the enterprise and other funds, and also completed all of the questions regarding those department budgets. And we had published that public testimony would be in writing and would be presented this evening for the city's general fund, which I'll do here in a couple minutes. The one question, pardon me, that was left unanswered from last night, and I sent out a memo to the budget committee earlier today, and it had to do with the amount of revenues that were budgeted for the city's right-of-way licensing fee. Mr. Amer identified that he felt that the $243,000 amount that was budgeted should have been closer to $260,000, which is what we had budgeted for the current year. We went back and took a look at the estimated amounts and the budgeted amounts for the other franchises and discovered that Mr. Amer was correct. And so what we believe needs to happen is we'll adjust the budgeted revenue for that up to the $262,000. That really has no bearing on the appropriations and expenditures for the year. What it will do is it will change the general fund's unappropriated ending fund balance by $19,000 from $1,928,125 to $1,947,125. And so we'll make that change, and that's what will go forward, assuming that there are no other changes in the budget when the city council ultimately considers it for adoption. I just wanted to thank Mr. Amer for the discussion on that. So that was really the gist of the open items from last night. And if there are any additional questions that come up during deliberations, we can certainly field those at that time. But that's the portion of my recap, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the recap. So we'll actually just move into the public testimony portion of the committee here, the committee meeting. So Robert, I know we received quite a few public comments via email from folks. If you could just go ahead and share those with us, please.
Sure. So we did receive a letter, and this actually went out to the city councils of Grande, Island City, Cove, Elgin, Embler, North Powder, and Union. And it's from the Blue Mountain Humane Association. And it was a follow-up to the letter that they had sent on February 15th regarding funding for the Blue Mountain Humane Association. And the letter reads, we hope you have had time to discuss placing your local animal shelter in your budgets. Please feel free to contact any of the board members listed below should you desire more information or would like one of us to attend a council meeting. Following are the first quarter numbers per municipality, 176 intake of animals, and I'll just identify of that 176 for LeGrand, there were 39 dogs, 45 cats, and 2 bunnies. And they had 173 outcomes, which are 58 adoptions, 1 death, 1 was dead on arrival, and 37 returned to owners, and then 76 transfers. And again, they're asking that each of the municipalities be able to continue to support the communities that they serve. And just as a reminder, the city of LeGrand does budget $9,500 in the proposed budget that goes through the county, but is received by the Humane Association. And I know that during the discussion last night, Mayor Clements had raised the issue of potentially providing some increased funding, and I know that'll be a topic during the deliberations. We also received a number of emails in support of the library, and I'll just run through these. The first one is from Linda Burnham. Mr. Strope, I urge you and the City Council to support Kip Roberson's request for 2 additional library staff members in order to expand the library hours. I was shocked to discover yesterday, April 24th, that the library is no longer open on Saturdays. That closure limits access for people who work during the week and access to the library, and encouraging the community to use libraries an important part of city services. In addition, public spaces are critical in developing a culture of community. Having the library open near the end of farmers market hours will allow further citizen interaction, something we sorely need after a year of being so splintered. I live outside the city limits, and I'm glad that the new $50 fee will enable those of us outside the city to help support the library financially. Surely that new fee will help finance library staff needed to restore the hours to a critically needed level. The next one is from Cheryl Simpson. Mr. Strope, for 2 decades, or close to 2 decades, I have actively used our local LeGrand library. It is a vital part of our community, providing funding to maintain current staffing levels, and adding more staff in the future is a high priority of mine. The library meets the needs of all age groups, from the youngest to the oldest in our community. Some thoughts to consider. And there are a variety of quotes that she provided. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. Who doesn't love a library? It's a place where you can go in any town and discover the world. Books constitute capital. A library book lasts as long as a house for hundreds of years. It is not then an article of mere consumption, but fairly of capital, and often, in the case of professional men setting out in life, is their only capital. The 3 most important documents in a free society are a birth certificate, a passport, and a library card. The only thing you absolutely need to have is The only thing you absolutely have to know is the location of the library. To build up a library is to create a life. What is more important in a library than anything else? Than everything else is the fact that it exists. Cutting libraries in a recession is like cutting hospitals in a plague. Another one is from Ann Morrison. Mr. Strope, I'm writing to express my concern about library funding. I consider the library to be critical to our community, particularly during the pandemic when we have been subject to closures and lockdowns and the cancellation of so many other kinds of activities and entertainment. The library has provided a ready source of information, entertainment in the form of resources such as books, videos, podcasts, and activities. The staff has been creative in finding ways to help resources available to the community through things like curbside book pickups. It has sustained so many of us through the difficult days of the pandemic. The pandemic is not yet over, and the library will continue to be critical if further lockdowns and closures are required. It is a home away from home for the elderly and for the youth of our community. Because of the many services it provides so many people in our community, I urge full funding of this critical resource. Doreen McCarthy. Hello. I heard the Budget Committee is discussing the funding for our library in Grande. I wanted to share my thoughts on this while there is still time for consideration. The library is the cornerstone of our community. It has so much to offer everyone. The library is excuse me a minute. It's a great time to be getting over a cold. Library is a very needed service that should be in the forefront of the services offered. Please make it a priority when the committee sits down to discuss where funds should go. The library is absolutely essential for the health and well-being of our citizens. At a time when stress and uncertainty is rampant, we can always go to the library and check out books and media, have a place to use the internet, and feel at home in our library. I cannot say enough how important it has been to me raising my children here when we could go together and check out books. And now in my older age, how satisfying it is to feel connected and what a joy to be able to bring home books, audio materials that I could not afford to buy. Thank you for taking my hopes for a continued fully funded library that offers us all so much into your discussion. This is from Ellen Krieger, I believe the name is pronounced. I strongly urge approval of the library's budget in order for the director and staff to continue their excellent work providing this essential service to our town. Jenny Tucker. Robert, I'm a lifelong library user no matter where I have lived. I am presently on the State Library of Oregon Board of Directors and know how important libraries have been across the state and the nation. It's embarrassing to think that Cook Library has closed in the past due to not enough staff around to keep it open. 4+ director kip is not enough staff. Living outside Somerville, I have no problem paying $50 so that I can use the services of Cook Memorial Library. This does not begin to help on staffing when one is sick, on vacation, etc. Please increase the library's budget so KIP can hire 2 more part-time staff. Thank you. Anna Maria Dill. Dear Mr. Strope and members of the City of Grande Budget Committee, I'm writing in support of the Cook Memorial Library's request to increase funding to support 2 part-time library clerks that would allow the library to reopen on Saturdays and to ensure the continuity of services the rest of the week. Cook Memorial Library is critical to the children, adults, and families of Grande and Union County. It's a vital resource for many members of the community. The library plays major roles in the lives of our citizens by creating a vibrant and welcoming space where young children are encouraged to embark on a lifelong love of reading, and where older children and teens can meet after school and on Saturdays to work on school projects, do research, and learn to interact with one another and with a wealth of informational resources in an intelligent and safe manner. Our library provides support for individuals who are seeking to continue their education at all levels. We look to librarians to assist and guide us in accessing information pertinent to our lives and well-being. As a parent, retired educator, and former literacy volunteer, I know the vital role the library has played in the lives of my children, their friends, and many of my students. For working families, it's critical to have access on Saturdays and during evening hours. I have witnessed the transformation of families who have benefited from the programs that support our public library and its staff have provided over the course of the 34 years that I have called LeGrande my home. Despite the periodic funding struggles that LeGrande has weathered, our city leaders have upheld LeGrande's legacy in supporting those resources so critical to the health, education, well-being of its citizens. I urge you to continue to do so and provide the additional funding the library currently needs. The next one is from Christine Alfrippi. Dear Mr. Stroop, having the library open on Saturdays is good for our community. Please support funding for the part-time employees that would enable the library to be open. The next is from Aaron Thornburg. Mr. Stroop, it's my understanding that the Cook Memorial Library is requesting to add 2 part-time employees in order to continue to provide services for the citizens of LeGrande and the surrounding region. I wanted to write to you in order to express my wholehearted support of this request. The library is an essential service that benefits the residents of LeGrande and the surrounding area greatly. Its ability to provide services, perhaps particularly on the weekend, improves the lives and education of many who benefit from those services, including the use of our area. So again, I would urge that you do whatever you can to facilitate the request made by the library. The next one is from Olivia Thornburg. Hello, this is Olivia. I am emailing you to tell you that I'm in support of the library budget. This is important to me because I know that some young people in LeGrande go to the library on Saturdays to read and sometimes use the library's computers because they do not have a computer of their own. I hope you agree to the library's budget because I think that Saturday is the day that most people visit the library, and it is one of the only times that kids in school have time to do their research. I hope you think about accepting the library's budget, and thank you for reading my email. And it's actually signed Olivia M. Thornburg, 11 years old. The next one is from Jack Dittman. It seems odd to have to write a letter in favor of literacy. Sign of the times, I guess. Adults work and children go to school, so it seems obvious that we need to have the library open on Saturdays. How can funding enough help to do that even be a question? Thank you for your attention. The next one is from Sophia Thornburg. Hello, my name is Sophia and I'm in support of the budget mostly because I would like the library to be open on the weekend. A lot of kids are in the library on the weekend because it's hard to go on school days. Now, I'd love to keep playing D&D on Saturdays. It has been the only thing I could do during the pandemic other than school, and the friends I have made are some of the closest I have. Thank you, Sophia, age 13. And finally, from Angela D'Antonio, I believe. I'm writing in support of the proposed library budget and the adding of 2 part-time employees to assist in delivery of their services. The library is one of the greatest equalizers in our community and society more generally. Libraries offer a remarkable wealth of resources to every member of our community. Beyond free access to the books, periodicals, and videos we enjoy, patrons turn to their libraries for free internet and ebooks, personal finance tools, and information for job searches and small business opportunities. Libraries help level the playing field for job seekers who need to fill in online applications for employment and children without home computers or reliable internet access for completing school assignments. Having more staff will allow the library to reopen on Saturdays and extend some of their valuable programs. Saturday is a great time for children to use the library both for enjoyment and school research. My own children have been part of a librarian-led group that meets on Saturdays. This group has continued to meet online throughout the pandemic. Not only has this provided some stability and continuity for this group of teens, but it has also provided vital support to individual members who have had a number of life challenges along the way. Please support the library budget as is presented, including the necessary funding to increase the staffing. Thank you for your consideration. And that concludes all of the written public testimony that was provided for the city's general fund. So, Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Robert. And so at this point, we'll just go ahead and open up deliberations of the committee here to discuss anything within the general fund budget only. We can start that conversation. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Ashley, Steve here. I'd like to come back to my my point from last night about funding, some additional funding for the Blue Mountain Humane Association. You saw it in the numbers that they provided to us just the other day. More than 50% of the animals that they intake are coming from Grande. The amount of money that they receive hasn't changed in probably 10 years. And inflation has moved along without any, real impact, with a real impact on them in terms of their costs of feeding and caring for the animals. My proposal last night was for an additional $5,000 that would go directly to the shelter, along with the $50,000 that the county gives them. If you do some math and you do the compounding effect of inflation, really they should be getting, if I look at my numbers right, they should be getting probably close to $68,000 from the county total to keep up with inflation. If you look at what, if you take 50% of that and you consider what the city already gives them, another $5,000 actually brings them up to about where they should be with inflation. And so my proposal, let me see, I think I've written out a motion here, if you give me a second to find it. So what we're looking at is budget line item 001-110-628750, and that's in the council, city manager, and personnel budget. And I'd like to move we increase that line item to by $5,000 to a total of $14,500, with the understanding that the full amount is paid to the Blue Mountain Humane Association by the county without reducing any county contributions. So I'm making that motion formally so that we can at least decide whether or not we want to.
Understood. And I believe we can move into discussion on that motion once we have a second. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Thank you. Great. So, yep. Steve, if you've got any more that you'd like to add now as part of our discussion, feel free, or we can have others chime in as they'd like.
We've been a strong supporter of the shelter for a long time, through thick and thin. Again, I said this last night, they've made a tremendous comeback in the last year with a new board of directors and a lot of volunteer efforts. I really encourage people to go out there and take a look at what they've done. They're putting it back to being a shelter the way it's supposed to be. I've been out there to visit. I've talked to Bev Beach and other members of the board, and they can really use this money to do good things. And if it's not that much, I hate to use this as an example, but we budget $500,000 for overtime at the fire department. Another $5,000 for Humane Association, I think, is a drop in the bucket. And we just found another $14,000 tonight from including money that was for the right-of-way fees. Anyway, that's my position.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I mean, I'll throw my hat in on this too in favor of it. I mean, there's been a bit of a renaissance, I suppose, out there at the shelter over the last few years, and we are looking at a really competent crew out there now, the board and staff, and I've got great confidence in their abilities. And as you've mentioned, I mean, if they've not seen any sort of increase in funding in that long, of course, costs of goods and services are continuing to go up. So I think we've got a group out there right now that will be good stewards of this additional funds. Anybody else have anything to add, or we have a motion, we have a second, we can wrap up the discussion and move into the vote. Anybody else? Robert, I see your lips moving, but I think you're muted.
I think I am too. I see Gary Lillard and David Glade both have their hands up in the participant thing.
Oh, I see. I've called that up. Okay, Gary, why don't we hear from you?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Steve, I was just wondering, in the course of your research, were you able to determine if the city contribution has historically pretty much always been a part of the county contribution, or is that a more recent development?
Let me go ahead and answer that, because I know the answer.
I think Robert is a better handle on that. I will say, I think before Robert became city manager, the full amount from the city went directly to the shelter, and we had an agreement with the shelter that they would provide reports to us on a regular basis, as they were supposed to do with the county. And then after Robert came on, he saw some efficiencies to be gained by running the money through the county. And then the shelter would only have to report to the county itself rather than reporting to two funding entities. I think that's pretty much what Robert is probably going to say, but I'll let him finish it up.
I'm sorry, did that result in any decrease in the county contribution?
It did not. So just a slight correction. For the first 2 or 3 years that I was here, the city was providing, I think, $10,000 of support. It was cut back to $9,500. At the same time, we cut some city staff. And then subsequent, 3 or 4 years later, the shelter indicated that they were going to stop performing the accepting of animals from animal control from the city of Grande and Union County if they did not receive additional funding. And there was quite a bit of consternation associated with that. And the city council, and I think that also the agreement that we had with them had expired, and we had drafted, I think we had worked on drafting a new agreement, and then when they said that they were going to stop doing the animal control function and accepting stray animals that were brought in, the county was looking at having to find another provider for those services, such as a local vet. And the feeling of the city at that time was, if that function is going to go to another entity, then the city's funding should follow that. And that was what caused us to not enter into a new agreement. And Steve McClure, county commissioner at the time, who was negotiating with the animal shelter, reached out and asked about the city's level of funding and whether or not our intent would be to continue that if the shelter and the county were to reach an agreement. I believe at the time the county was providing about $25,000 in support to the shelter. I indicated to Mr. McClure that we were looking at doing that, continuing to that $9,500. So that went into their consideration for that $50,000 amount that's in the current agreement. So it's, I think the county increased their contribution by $10,000 or $15,000 plus the $9,500 from the city, plus their historical amount to arrive at that $50,000 figure. And so that's when we made the change to pay the funds to the county to then go to the shelter. And it also prevented there being essentially two governing bodies attempting to have control or influence over the operation of the shelter. It made much more sense to have one entity have the agreement and us to provide the financial support. And since this issue has come up in recent months, in conversations with the county, I think what we are leaning towards when the contract comes up for renewal is to clarify in the agreement that the funding that is received by the county from the city will not be used to supplant any funding that the county is providing, which they have not done. They have not supplanted any of their contribution with the dollars that we have paid. Just to make it very clear that the city is providing funding that is channeled through, and that that funding is not to be diminished in the process. So that'll be something that we would do at the end of this coming year, because I think that's when the contract expires. A little more history than I think you're looking for, Gary.
It's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. David, yeah, I have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, so my only thoughts here are, while I agree with Steve that it would be really, really nice to fund the animal shelter at a higher level than we're currently doing. I do take issue with carving out more funds, honestly, at this point for anything other than absolute extreme priorities. Here we are running a budget deficit again this year in spite of an urban renewal under levy. And I think for me, the issue is not of wanting to fund it more, it's an issue of priorities. If I'm going to spare an extra $5,000 for anything in the city, I'm putting it toward the library, I'm putting it toward the roads, or I'm putting it toward Parks and Rec. And so that's just my thoughts on this, is that I'd like to. I don't think that this is appropriate again in a year where we're running another deficit and where there are higher priorities, I think, for any amount of funding, whether it's a drop in the bucket or not.
Good. Thank you. I don't see any more hands up in the participants column. If anybody else wants to speak to this item, feel free. Otherwise, we'll, I believe from here, we'll maybe entertain another reading of the motion, Steve, if that's necessary, to kind of put it in for the record, and then we'll vote.
Yeah, before the mayor does that, I just want to, as a reminder, Councilor Dudo, I'm sorry, Committee Member Dudo has declared an actual conflict of interest, so she'll be abstaining from this vote and discussion.
Understood. Should we do a roll call vote on this, Robert, since we're in a video call? Is that kind of what you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to do all of our votes by roll call, and
Right.
Sandra will do that
Understood.
whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Yeah, Steve, why don't we hear that one more time, and we'll do a roll call vote. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to include the line item in the motion again. I move we increase line item 001-110-628750 to $14,500, with the understanding that the full amount be paid, that the increase be paid to the increase of $5,000 be paid to the Blue Mountain Humane Association by the county without reducing any county contributions. In other words, the full $5,000, the budget would go up to $14,500, which would be $5,000 more that goes to the shelter directly.
Understood. Thank you. Sandra, if you could conduct a roll call vote, please.
You're on mute.
I apologize. Steve Clemens,
Yes.
Gary Lillard,
Yes.
David Glabe,
No.
Nicole Howard,
Yes.
Marianne Miesner,
Yes.
Justin Rock,
Yes.
Craig Amer,
No.
Matt Barber,
Yes.
Scott McConnell,
Yes.
Ashley O'Toole, Ashley,
Yes. Aye.
sorry,
It's okay.
Corinne Dudo, or Corinne Dudo,
And Green is going to abstain.
she's abstaining.
Abstaining.
Okay, got it.
Okay, is that everybody?
That
Thank
is
you.
everyone.
I think that was, I have 8 votes yes, 2 votes no. So thank you all for your support on this.
And just as a clarification, when we get to the point on a motion, the motion will be as amended.
Understood. Yep. Do we have any other topics up for deliberation before we do move into any sort of motion? Yeah, go ahead, Greg, please.
Yeah, I'm getting really frustrated because I've come to these meetings and with the trajectory, with your expenses, increasing your revenues, I've never heard any discussions from 15 budget committee members about how to lower operating expenses or contain them. And that's why I got on this committee. I was hoping that we'd sometime get some discussion from the department heads to maybe show what they've done, ideas they've come up with, et cetera, to show that we're getting the highest and best use out of the money that we're given. And I've never heard anything. I like the animal shelter. I think they're a great opportunity, but you know, this just this runaway train that we're on of expenses and labor costs and et cetera, and no containment of it. We have to underfund every year to balance the budget. That's not budgeting. That's just kicking the can down the road. You know, I'm sorry, that's the way I feel about it. And I just like buying the pickup. I ran into a car dealer last night and I said, how much can a half-ton pickup tow? And he says, you can buy a half-ton pickup now. It'll tow 13,500 pounds. That's a lot of weight, but that's what's happened. Technology's changed. There's different ways to look at things all the time. And so, but I never hear anything about trying to do that. And my best example is when the department head goes from running a Ford Ranger to a full quad cab Chevy pickup to drive 2 miles around the city of Grande. I think maybe you got some problems about how you spend your money. And nobody ever makes any comments. There's no questions. 15 people on this budget committee, 5 of us ask questions. Everybody else just at the end of the meeting go, yep, sounds good to me. Yes.
Well, Greg, I can speak some thoughts to that briefly. I mean, we talked about the number of emails that had gone back and forth from committee members to department heads. And I know there were more than just 1 or 2 or 3 people asking some pointed specific questions about that. I believe this is my 6th year on the budget committee, and something that I've truly come to believe over the years, you know, and these last 2 years, this year and last year, have been over Zoom. So it's just a different dynamic, different chemistry. It's not everybody in a room with a crowd full of department heads coming up. There were more questions in person in real time when we were in person. There were also emails ahead of time. I think in these last couple of years, there have been more emails than usual as a result of being on Zoom. But if I go back to the days of being on committee where we were all in person, that was something that would, to me as a committee member, was just a recurring theme kind of department to department, was that we had good, honest people doing the best they can, proposing a budget for their department that they thought was their best efforts to operate on as little as they can. And so me personally, I've learned over the years on the budget committee to actually really trust and believe a lot of these department heads are doing a really good job. And it's important for folks like yourself to be on the committee, and anyone else who wants to ask questions that are more pointed and challenge to the department heads. I mean, that is a really important function of this committee, is to check that sort of thing. So I, for one, can say I didn't write an email. I for one, can say I didn't ask any department heads any questions tonight or last night. because I reviewed the budget and I'm looking at years past and I'm seeing the budget numbers we did last year, and I remember the conversations around those numbers. And so I want to say, thank you for sharing those thoughts. It's important, and I'm sure there's other folks on the committee that might share those same thoughts that aren't speaking up. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in on that as well. If anybody else wants to jump in on the conversation,
Actually, I do.
feel free. Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
One thing is, we
Marianne.
have had work sessions on working this as council members. So we're not just sitting here quietly and letting it go through. We do work on and try to, adjust different things with the budget and things that we can make better for the city. But in the same sense, trying to give all the same services we have in the past. So sitting here and being quiet doesn't mean we're not doing things. We've done a lot before we come to this budget hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, Justin, good point. A lot of homework is going in ahead of time to try to make these hearings efficient, and efficient use of everyone's time. We had Marianne had her hand up, and then Steve. Go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, well, I was just looking, if you look at the budget, the current budget, and you look to see what we increased it this year was less than probably like 500,000. However, what the departments were requesting was a lot more. That has gotten toned down. It's got cut down before we ever saw it. So I feel that because the council, being on the council, we have discussed it before. We know what we can afford and what we can't afford. I agree with you, Greg, to one degree that we're going in the wrong direction to some ways, because we know there's going to be a time when our revenues are going to catch up to our contingency and to our cash carryover, that we're going to have to really look at something. But we've done that before. That's how we keep adjusting that. And I think if you just look at what the departments requested and what they get, it is 400,000 less than what they wanted. So it's been pared down before it came to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I know, Steve, you raised your hand on the screen, and Gary clicked the hand button.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys figure out who wants to go first there. Go ahead, Steve.
Just very quickly, to talk to Greg's point about the pickup truck, and I believe that's in Parks and Rec. If you look at the Parks and Rec budget, it's actually down from 2018 to 2019 fiscal year was 482,000. This year it's about 460,000. Our parks in particular, I've watched that budget just sort of stay basically neutral, with increases primarily because of for insurance increases and health insurance increases and staffing costs. The Parks and Rec is a really prime example of doing a lot with what they have, and it's a real visible example of the efficiencies that can be had in some departments. Other departments need. We have strong unions in both the police and fire, and we negotiate with them for regular salary increases. Those are things that are just sort of built into the budget that we work at controlling as best we can, but they're expectations of salary increases. And so I understand what Greg's saying. I seriously, I'm wondering when the day comes that Robert says, underfunding isn't going to help us any, and we have to cut positions. We've been through that before. It's not easy. It's hard to lay off people, decide where those cuts have to take place. And that's when the rubber meets the road, really, about making the cuts that we have to do. So I understand what he's saying. I appreciate what Greg's position, what he brings to the budget committee. But like Justin and Marianne said, a lot goes on in the council, in work sessions before we get here, and it sets a tone for what we're expecting from department directors and from the city manager. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Gary, you had your hand up a moment ago, but he brought it down. Do you need would you want to speak?
I'll speak for a moment. Thank you. I wanted to address the questions that were referenced earlier. You know, it did strike me as kind of odd last night, the amount of quiet that there was. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the Zoom format, but I also think that it's healthy for the public to be aware of what we are looking at, what questions are being asked. It would be nice if there was some way, some format to get questions out in front of the public, so they realize that we aren't just sitting around on our hands. There's work going on, there's consideration going on, there's thought, there are questions. I just think that's a healthier, more transparent way of doing things. So I'd like to see some discussion at some point about how we accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Robert, his hand is up. Go ahead, sir.
And I'll actually unmute this time. I appreciate Mr. Amer's comments, but I think that it's important to take a look at what occurred before Mr. Amer came onto the Budget Committee, and actually what occurred before many members of the Budget Committee and Council had their current positions. I got here in 2008. Since that time, particularly early in that time, we had to make some very difficult decisions. We cut 2 positions out of the police department, of which we've restored 1. We eliminated a fire prevention officer, which actually resulted in a layoff. We have not restored that position. As a cost savings measure, at one point, we stopped doing the overtime in the fire department to call back a crew in anticipation of a 3rd ambulance call. That's something we actually put back in the budget a few years ago. And I think that was a good decision from a service level. We have never restored back the hours at the pool and the library that we had to cut when we cut staffing there. We have restructured the health care benefits for all of our employees, so it's a much different package than they had 10 years ago. 2 of our collective bargaining groups in the middle of a contract agreed to take an annual pay freeze. And then the 3rd group did it the following year. So we've had employees that have taken pay freezes. We have cut healthcare benefits. We've stood up 2 different committees at different times to take a look at the city's financial situation. And those groups made recommendations on both sides of the ledger, both on reductions and on revenue enhancements, all in an effort to get us to the point where we are now, which is a lower cost than it would otherwise have been for our labor force, which is one of our huge cost pieces. And yeah, we can certainly point to 1 or 2 expenditures here and there where we say, well, that wasn't the best decision. But I think that to go back in the past and say, well, 3 or 4 years ago, you should have done this differently or you did that differently. I think we learned from some of those decisions. And I think that the discussion about the pickup truck for the Parks Department, I think Stu Spence did a good job of explaining the benefits of spending $28,000 for a bare bones truck that will meet the needs that we have for a lot of years, and will have less maintenance costs because it's under warranty as compared to a similarly cost new vehicle. He's not buying a crew cab 4-door Silverado with all the bells and whistles. That's not what is in this budget that's before the Budget Committee. And I do think that our directors do a phenomenal job of providing services within the constraints. And they do come in with very conservative budgets and requests because they understand our situation. So I feel a bit of a need to kind of defend the team, which includes the council and the Budget Committee, as we look at things. I think that the committees over the years have done a good job of critically analyzing the request for increase in services, the request to buy a new ambulance, which is a big ticket item, and why we need to do those things. And I think we are being very responsible with the city's funds, because we do recognize that they come from our taxpayers and we owe that to them. So that's kind of my history piece about the cost cutting things that have been done in the past that have positioned us well at present. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I just got one more comment. And I may be wrong on this, but when I've gone back through these departments, when I see their cash on hand that they have, and I add it all up, I come up to about $16 million that the city has in the bank right now. And some of that's unappropriated, some of it isn't, but it doesn't seem like the city's really hurting for cash, and you're telling me you got a bare bones budget. You keep putting away 500,000 here, 200,000 here. You budget $100,000 for consultants, but you only use 20,000 of it. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. And furthermore, I look at the city of Ontario. They've used the private sector to do their services. And I brought this up last year. Nobody wants to talk about it, but their finance departments, they contract with an accounting firm, costs them $200,000 a year to have them do the accounts receivable, accounts payable, utility clerk, and have a certified public accountant on staff. And their goal by their city council was to pass an audit. And what I've looked for, you've never been able to pass an audit. There's always, well, we have to come in here and we have to finish the financial statements before the auditors can even complete the audit. And that doesn't make any sense to me when we're paying $105,000 per full-time employee in the finance department. Per full-time employee is $105,000. The certified public accountant wages in Northeast Oregon is $58,000, the wage part of it. What I see the benefit package that the city have, it usually adds up to about 40%. So we're paying, the citizens of Grande are paying an equivalent of 4 certified public accountants on staff, and I don't think we got one that has that skill level or demonstrated that skill level. And that's just one department. City of Ontario, they use a private contractor for their public works too, and for their parks too. And Steve's a great guy. He's doing a great job. I got a little question about the pickup he chose. We could flip a coin on that one. But there's other ways to save money. And you can see how Ontario's doing it.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. We can continue on this topic if anybody wants to share any more thoughts. If not, we can have a discussion about anything else on the general fund only before we move into vote to approve as amended. All right, then we'll go ahead and hold that vote to have it approved as amended. I'll entertain a motion, please.
I move that the public hearing for the city's general fund budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 be closed, and that the ad valorem property tax rate of 7.4392 per $1,000 of assessed value be imposed for the general fund, and that the general fund be approved as amended and forwarded in its entirety to the City Council for adoption during the regular session of the City Council on June 2nd, 2021.
Thank you. That's the motion. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Second.
I'll second.
Couple seconds. We'll go with Nicole, I guess, for the record. That's whose hand I saw first. Thank you. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion, or shall we have the vote? All right, Sandra. If you
real quickly before the vote, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what the amendments are. We are increasing the contribution to the animal shelter through the county of $5,000, and we're adjusting the revenue line for the right-of-way licensing to increase it by $19,000. So those are the two changes from what was proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Robert. And With no further discussion, Sandra, if you could hold a roll call vote, please.
Steve Clemens,
Yes.
Gary Lillard,
Yes.
David Glabe,
Yes.
Nicole Howard,
Yes.
Mary Ann Meisner,
Yes.
David Rock,
Yes.
Greg Amer,
No.
Matt Barber,
Yes.
Scott McConnell,
Yes.
Ashley O'Toole,
Yes.
Corinne Dudo. She's
Abstained.
abstained.
I think you missed Glade.
Oh, did I?
No, we got it.
David Glabe?
You got me the first time, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you. If that is everybody, it appears that motion has passed and we're going to adopt the budget as amended. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, so moving out of the general fund budget, we'll move into enterprise and other funds. At this point, we would entertain written public testimony. We didn't receive any written public testimony regarding enterprise and other funds. So with that, we can move straight into committee deliberation about any of the items on enterprise and other funds. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns, amendments? Okay. I don't see any hands up. So with that, we'll close upon conclusion of budget committee deliberations. So we'll close the public hearings on fiscal year 2021 and 2022 budgets and state revenue sharing. And at this point, we'll go ahead and entertain the suggested motion, or if anybody would like to read the motion for us, we'll take that.
I move that the enterprise and other funds budgets for fiscal year 2021-22 be approved as presented and forwarded to their entity to the City Council for adoption during the regular session of the Council on June 2nd, 2021.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Any final discussion? Robert, do you have anything you'd like to add or anything of that nature?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, let's have a roll call vote.
Steve Clemens,
Yes.
Gary Lillard,
Yes.
David Glabe,
Yes.
Nicole Howard,
Yes.
Mary Ann Meisner,
Yes.
Justin Rock,
Yes.
Greg Amer,
No.
Matt Barber,
Yes.
Scott McConnell,
Yes.
Ashley O'Toole,
Yes.
Corinne Dudo.
Yes.
Thank you. Sounds like that motion has carried too, and we'll adopt the enterprise and other funds as they were presented. So at this point, we're going to adjourn for tonight. And then everybody, if everybody has one more appearance here for the budget committee, and that's going to be the June 2nd regular council session, will appear here again. Do we have any other final thoughts? Robert, Mr. Mayor, anybody have anything to add before we call it a night?
I just want to thank everybody. I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Just a quick correction and apology. The overtime for the fire department is not 500,000, but about 250. So my apologies. I did not mean to make a pointed issue about that.
Thumbs up from Emmett. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I really want to thank the budget committee for all the work that you put into this. It's a pretty concise time frame to do it, and it's a lot of material to go through. And so again, I sincerely appreciate the work that you do and the comments that you make, and we do take all of them into account as we move forward for next year's budgeting. And particular thanks to the directors and their staff for putting together the budget and then living within it in the coming year and doing the best I can for our citizens. So my appreciation.
Great. Yeah, here. Thank you, Robert. And yeah, thanks to the committee for their service. Mary Ann, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to echo Gary's concern about the public not knowing what the questions were that we asked. We
Mm.
had pages and pages of those questions and really good responses from the department heads and from Robert. I think they're missing out on what we learned. And-
I'll put together kind of a summary of those questions and answers and get something on the website that kind of conveys those pieces. It's not in a 10 or 12 page thing that'll be concise that makes those points.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Great, thank you, Robert. Yeah. Anyone else with final thoughts? Okay, then I guess stand by for further correspondence from Robert and company regarding the June 2nd regular council meeting. And with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.